Welcome to the Wordsmith Forge Christian Fiction Podcast. This is where you meet the Christian fiction authors who write the books you want and ought to read. To welcome with me today, Mitchell Karnes. So Mitchell, welcome to the Wordsmith Forge Christian Fiction Podcast.
That's a mouthful, isn't it, Mike?
For some reason, that's hard for me to say. I practice a lot. Wordsmith Forge Christian Podcast. So, Mitchell, would you mind introducing yourself?
Sure. Mitchell S. Karnes is my name that I use on all my books. I'm a retired pastor, also retired English teacher from public and private. I work with a family company downstairs of my house. We're a payroll business for the music industry primarily. And then I write on top of that.
Sounds like a busy man there.
Yes, keep busy.
So I understand you live in Tennessee?
I do, in Brentwood, just south of Nashville. I have my wife here, and two of my daughters and their families live with us. We have 7 kids in all, and 9 grandkids, and 1 on the way.
Mercy. That's a lot of family. Sounds great. So around where you live, is there some place in nature that you like to just go and kind of recharge your batteries, a park or anything like that?
Yes, we have a common ground area where I live right now, which is not very far from me. I had cancer twice, so still not quite at top of my speed and have certain side effects to that, but I can do a little walking there, and we have a Brentwood Park not too far from my house as well.
That sounds good. Kind of off what you might think a question would be, but what are your 3 top movies that you like to watch?
Top movies. Number 1 is Princess Bride.
All right.
Yes, Galaxy Quest and Silverado. So all have kind of a little sarcastic tone to them, and but they're great movies. I love to quote them with my family as well.
Inconceivable.
Yes. I don't think that means what you think it means.
Oh, yeah. Very good. So what inspired you to become an author? You've got a varied set of skills there. Well,
I've been writing since 4th, 5th grade. 6th grade, really started writing stories. 8th grade, I got my first publication, a letter to the editor. And then my first short story was actually published my sophomore year of college.
Interesting. Yeah, that's quite an accomplishment, I think. So for this last book that, as I noticed, was just published last month.
It came out the 29th of January.
Right. What gave you the inspiration to write that?
Well, I had a book, my first book, Crossing the Line, and then the editor fell through with that after doing much edits and kind of forcing me to combine my original book and the prequel to it, which was the story of their fathers. And so many, many years later, I got the rights back to that, and I revised it the way I wanted to do it to begin with. And that with Amazon, and it's called Scales of Justice now. But that was a story about a hitman who had been told all of his life that his parents died in this car accident, and he had kind of a forced amnesia on that. And so his memories began to come back to him, and he realizes someone within his own organization actually killed his parents. And so that's why I called it Crossing the Line to begin with. But Scales of Justice was a more appropriate title because everyone had their own sense of what justice meant. And so I introduced him to a Christian woman who was his neighbor. He starts to open up his emotions, which he had walled off for so long. And so he meets her, and once the time he gets to the point where he finds out who it is and he's ready to exact his revenge, he has a conscience suddenly on him. So I introduced Abby Rhodes as a police officer in that one. And so this is kind of a Abby Rhodes 2.0. She's a homicide detective here in Nashville, And she has a backstory where she has gone to the military in Germany, spent 3 years there as a military police, and then you go back even further, and she was in a missionary family in Guatemala. And so each book, her story arc kind of goes over the 6-book series, and that's what Mike Parker at WordCrafts agreed to publish those 6 books. And so in Watergrave, you get kind of her first release of that backstory and her secret. And so as a pastor at the time, I was walking through my sanctuary, kind of picking up bulletins that were there from the week before, turned around and saw the baptistry, and in my mind, all of a sudden flashed a pastor dead floating at the top of the water.
Oh, my.
So, yeah, out of all things to focus in my mind. But then they started the process of who would have done that, why would they have done that, and so that's where the story built. But the tagline is kind of a young pastor is found dead in the bottom of his baptistry, and Abby Rhodes must investigate in the place she swore never to return, and that's the church. And so it kind of teases out her story.
Well, I feel like I'm compelled to ask you this.
Okay.
Are you a Beatles fan?
Yes, I am. And in book 4, it's called Abby's Road. And they use the album to give, the killer does, to give her slight clues to see if she can outsmart.
Oh, my goodness. That sounds really fascinating.
Yeah. And she changed her name. She's originally Hannah Leah Abelard. But to spite her father, who was a missionary, she chose the Beatles album to rename herself because he said the Beatles were the cause of the destruction of morals and society.
Well, yeah.
Look for God in all other places but God.
Yeah, kind of hard to figure out the creator of the universe if you've already decided that God is not a part of the equation.
Right. That's like that John Lennon song, Imagine. And people are singing that at their funerals, but it says, imagine there's no religion, imagine there's no heaven. Yeah. It's not a religious song.
Not in the least. It's
very humanistic.
I was searching for humanistic. So you've kind of gone over not just Watergrave, but some of your other books there.
I published a young adult fantasy series, and it's based on Dungeons and Dragons. And so what happened is I took a real portion of my life where I used to play Dungeons and Dragons with 2 other friends, and we would rotate who was in charge of running the game. But our characters got so powerful, it got boring to 2 of us. And so we decided to get rid of the characters. Well, the other guy was set on not doing that. He liked his character. Yeah. So we kind of underhandedly killed him off, and he took it as if we had killed him. He went looking for a gun, and thank God we had changed the location of where we were that night, and there were no guns in the house. Had we been at his house, he has them in his, right there unlocked and loaded. So that was the first part of the story, and then there's a trilogy where they come back years later and get into the game and find out it's not what they thought it was going to be. It's not like being on paper. And so I call it the Canaan Shade Journeys. And so Canaan being the promised land of milk and honey, and then it's Canaan Shade. So it's the shadow of what they thought it would be, and it turns out to be something they try to get away from. So getting in the game was a dream of a lifetime. Getting out was the nightmare no one anticipated. That's the whole series.
What prompted me to start this podcast is, there were several things, but one of them was mothers wanting books that their sons could read that had good biblical principles and that their sons would relate to. It's so easy. Yeah. It sounds like that's something that any young fellow that ever played Dungeons and Dragons or Warcraft or any of those kinds of games would relate to.
The first story, An Ominous Pact, is about the bullying that goes on, and so you find out that they use this game to become powerful people because they're not powerful. It deals with wrestling, and I was a wrestling coach in middle school and high school, and so that's a big part of the game, or the book as well. And so all of that, and it goes against that the grain of what his youth minister is saying they ought to do and what his father had let him do. And so he's searching for what is the right thing.
The world will certainly fill him in on what's the right things, what right things are if we don't. So without biblical principles, we're all just out there drifting around in a sea
absolutely.
So, yeah.
I don't know how people make it through tragedies without God.
No, I don't either. Are there key themes or messages that you would like people to take away from your books?
Yeah, each one has an overall theme, and that's part of being an English teacher as well. But for Watergrave, the tagline on the back of the book says, "Own the truth, or the truth will own you." So, and the first truth is capital T. So, you have to own up to your sin, your things that you've done wrong, because without that, you can never see that I need help. And the help is actually with the truth that will set you free, and that's Jesus Christ. So Abby has to come from a place where someone had really hurt her and cast her out of the church. And so she blames all church people, and she blames God for that, for this one person's. And that's where my heartstrings really pull, is those who have been hurt by someone and end up, I don't think you can be an atheist and not believe in God, because how can you be angry at something that you don't believe in?
Exactly.
And so it takes 6 books for her to slowly get to the point where she can reconcile with her past and with God, and therefore with the church. And so there are characters in the story who are perfect examples of Christ and his love that counteract what she grew up with a very, very hard-nosed, ritualistic, pharisaical father who blames her for something that she didn't do, but casts her out because she was a bad reflection of his ministry. And it's not for the faint of heart. It is, the world and sin is ugly. And I think that's where people need Jesus the most.
I agree, and I don't think it does anyone any good when authors write with Pollyanna glasses on and ignores the fact that there's bad stuff out there, and it's seeking you and trying to pull you in. I expect to take a little bit of flack because I'm excluding female authors from my podcast.
Oh, okay.
At least for right now. And that's because when you go looking for a book, you see romance, romance, romance. And even some women are looking for books where romance isn't the central theme.
Right.
And so in my introductory podcast, I talked about girls reading books or growing up thinking about tea parties and Prince Charming and the knight on the white horse that comes riding in and swoops them off, whereas boys think completely different. And the company they keep and what they accidentally overhear, I can recall being somewhat disillusioned when I was down at the local feed store just hanging out, as a kid does sometimes, and I noticed one of the deacons from our church was down there, and they were swearing and telling jokes that sure interested me, but I didn't know exactly how to take it. The world's full of that kind of stuff.
Yeah. And in fact, my grandpa rejected Christ for many, many years because he had gotten drunk with the guys who ended up visiting him and trying to give him the gospel. So he was at the bar with them, and they were foul-mouthed, and they were drunk as a skunk, and came to him and trying to talk about the love of Jesus Christ. And so he took that as what all Christians were. In fact, he was angry when I felt like I had a call and went to seminary. He was going to disown me, and my dad gave him what for on that.
Yeah.
But, he and some of my children who have seen, and as a pastor, the stuff that went on behind and how people treated me.
Yeah.
It took a while for them to come back to the church, and some still haven't, because they saw people in the name of Christ doing, very worldly and harmful things.
I heard something just this morning about don't take the name of the Lord in vain. And I had always thought, well, yeah, you shouldn't swear using God. But this gentleman said it's much deeper than that. When you become a Christian, you take on the Lord's name. And you are an ambassador of Him. Sure, you shouldn't be swearing and cussing and telling lewd, off-colored jokes and things. You should treat people right, but you need to realize that people will judge God based on you. And if you don't, you have taken His name in vain. You're not a good ambassador. That's
the premise, really, of this whole series. What has happened to her based on people, in His name, doing things. Are you familiar with Royal Ambassadors?
Yes.
Okay, I grew up in Royal Ambassadors, and that's the kind of thing is where, I am a Royal Ambassador. I'm an ambassador for Christ, but as a Royal Ambassador, I will do my best. And then it goes on a whole series of things, but basically to be Christ into the world and to be a good representation of that. And so that's always been kind of my mantra as I've gone through life.
Yeah, I was never a royal ambassador, but I know young people who were. They went to a different church than I did, and at that age, I was far from being a royal ambassador. But that's a whole nother story that we don't need to get into. But I think we need to be conscious of how we conduct ourselves all the time.
You were talking about romance and that and female authors, but the challenge I had was writing this from Abby's voice.
Right.
And so having 4 daughters, my wife, sister-in-law, sister, kind of used all of their voices, the way they react to things, to tell this story from that perspective. But Abby, because of what's the hurt in her past, is kind of standoffish with that romance part. And so it takes several books before she even starts to lower those guards. And it's a Christian young man who's far different, doesn't look at her as, in fact, her line is, I want to be the subject of your affection, not the object. And so it's me, not what's my shell, that I want you to love.
Right. Yeah. It sounds like your series would be good not just for young boys, but young ladies when they consider how they're being treated and how they're being looked at. So I'm certainly not against female authors or
right,
women
in general. What you're going is just that Pollyanna.
Yeah.
In fact, one of the people from my church read it already. It just came out. She's finished the book, and she said, I went into there thinking this was going to be Little House on the Prairie. She goes, it's dark. And I said, the world of sin is dark, and she faces that. And so, but she wasn't expecting it to be that real, is how she put it.
Yeah, Pastor, what are you writing here?
I remember my first short story, and it came out, and it was kind of a fantasy type story, and several people from my church, I was 15, 16, and they said that I'm not a Christian, that if God had given you the gift of talent, you'd be writing Sunday school lessons instead of that trash. Yeah.
You have to get people off the street into the church before they can read Sunday school lessons.
And that's what Jesus said. I came for the lost,
Yeah. And I think Billy Graham said, I'm here to save Christians. When you expect a Christian to already be saved, but there's a lot of us walking around that need to be shined up a little bit.
Yeah. I can't remember what the percentage was, but he gave a shocking percentage of how many people in the church were not saved.
and that's probably increased over the years. I'm appalled at the different denominations that seem to think, well, now we need to kind of bend the knee to society a little bit and ignore some things in the scriptures. And boy,
don't get me started on that one.
Well, maybe that's another series you can write.
Another podcast, too.
Yeah.
Well,
Well,
there's a church, and I'm not going to name the denomination, on the way to getting to the church that I go to, and they have the sign up there, and it's always "Love is love, no matter who you love," and it goes on to all the things. They even put one on there, science, but it's they're like you say, going with culture, and only the parts of the Bible that are about love and grace do they take, and not the righteousness and the discipline and even the judgment.
Well, I could agree. Love is love, no matter who you love, if we're talking agape love.
Yeah, they weren't.
No. And that's the problem.
Because it came with a rainbow flag, so.
Gee. And how do we... I don't know if we need to counter that or not. I'm a firm believer that we just throw the seeds out and live the life. And, for some people, you and I are the only church or sermon people have heard.
Or Bible that they read.
Yes. So that's important.
Now, I have to ask you a question.
Sure. I
see guitars behind you. Do you play? And if so, what?
I played bass in our worship band for years.
Oh, okay.
But I'm actually probably a better guitar builder than a guitar player.
Okay.
I have my own little brand. MB. So the Hofner bass and Les Paul and I don't know what you call that other guitar. That's kind of a hillbilly hollow body.
Looks like a 12-string from here.
Yeah, that old boy has been around since 1968. And it's still got the price on the back, $146.
Oh, wow. Wow. I think I was 5.
Are you a musician?
Singer. I don't play anything. I've tried to play piano. I've tried to play guitar. I used to play the trumpet long ago, but then I wanted to sing more than play, and so that's what I ended up doing. Yeah.
Well, as bad a guitar player as I am, I'm a worse singer. And I give God all the praise for that. I know I recognize in me something that would have taken that gift and run it in the ground. I would not have treated it respectfully. So I just kind of nibble around on the edges of almost everything.
I think that's why God has kind of let me wait this long in my life to have a book series that's really taking off, is because I wouldn't have handled that well younger. It would have gotten all in my head. I would have thought it was all about me.
Right.
And probably done things that I shouldn't have done. And now it's a whole different story when you go through life and you see things.
You can actually step into God's plan.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you've been stepping in it, but you don't always know it.
Prepares you for that. So, I have 3 master's degrees, one in education, Christian education, and then counseling. Mm-hmm. And my wife always teased me about, can't you just go get a doctorate and get this over with? Yeah. But I wanted to learn different things. And so what God has done really is now in my writing, I use the psychology, I use the education, I use the ministry, and it all ties together. And there are things that I've heard people burdened by as a pastor or as a counselor that have really affected the characters that I use in the stories, the depth of those.
Yeah. I think everyone has a book in them based on their experiences. Not everyone's going to write that book, but it'd be nice if they did, I guess. I've written 2 books, and I didn't know that I was writing Christian fiction until I went to look, well, what genre should I list this under in Amazon?
Right.
And then your books are like 2 million something on Amazon. So I thought I'd find a podcast and maybe help my book out. And I looked around, and that's when I realized that women are wanting books that their husbands can connect with. They want books where romance might only be a natural part of the book, not the main theme. And that many women don't feel like their children, sons in particular, are getting the biblical principles in what they read or what they're doing on their devices. And
and it has access to so many things.
Oh, yeah.
Just in the palm of your hand.
Right. So I couldn't find a podcast to be on. And so I thought, okay, I'll start one. So I can see how God has moved me through so many different phases of my life. I started out in the military flying helicopters and bombed out of that program. And later I said, thank you, Jesus. So he has a plan. We just need to trust him.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite verses is Jeremiah 29:11. For the plans I have for you is not to harm you,
yes,
but to give you hope and a future. And that's one of the passages on a plaque that Abby sees. And as a detective coming to investigate the dead pastor, she says, yeah, tell that to your dead pastor. But the pastor ends up serving as a catalyst, as a Christ figure to her when she finds out how genuine he was, unlike her father. And then she ends up building this friendship with the widow that carries over several books.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to have to put that on my list of things to read. Doing podcasts and trying to get a pipeline full before I start publishing them. I don't really have much time to read. I read the samples on Amazon, but gets me going. And really, I'd rather the author tell me than for me to tell them what I read about their own book.
Well, we like to hear how it impacts people.
Yeah, of course. That brings up reviews, getting reviews of books. How do you think we can inspire people that read our work to leave a review?
I don't know. That's what my birthday is Sunday, and I put on my Facebook page, I said, what I want for my birthday is reviews of my new book.
Yeah, good idea. Yeah.
And I want you to be honest. If it impacted you in a negative way, let me know. I mean, the fact that it impacted you, I've done something right.
And it's proof that they read the book, and it had some, like you say, some impact. If I've see a book that's got 25 reviews and they're all 5s, I think, boy, that person has a lot of family and friends. I don't know that I can trust that. I would much prefer a 4. I might not be as delighted with a 3, but I think that's healthy. So how can listeners connect with you?
My website, mitchellskarnesauthor.com, or they can email me directly at mitchellskarnes@gmail.com. Been a pleasure.
I think this is what people would like to know about who's writing the books.
Yeah, I would love interaction. I would love to connect with book clubs. If they're reading my book, to sit there and either FaceTime me or ask me in advance something about the book and hear from them how it impacted them, who they identified with. And at the very back of the book, I have a section called Points to Ponder. It's kind of Bible study questions about the book.
Yeah, great.
And Mike was so gracious to include that in it.
Yeah, That's good. Is he a Christian publisher or
He is.
just a nice guy?
What I've gone through most of my rejections. I'm too Christian for the secular world. I'm too secular for the Christian world. And my agent was looking for kind of people right in that niche, and Mike was looking for people in that niche, because that's who he's burdened for too, is those who get lost between the Christian book and the secular book.
Well, I was surprised when Mike contacted me and let me know that you might be interested in being on a podcast. I just think it's so interesting talking to you authors. I will tell you, you're my fifth interview.
Okay. We did a great job.
Well, I hope it looks better when I take out all the blank spaces.
You made it more of a casual conversation, and that's nice.
Well, yeah, I'm not a professional, so I don't try to be. I'll let you go, Mitchell, and I really admire all the things you're involved in and the balls you're keeping up in the air.
He's blessed me very well, so just try to do my part.
You betcha. Could we have a moment of prayer here?
Absolutely.
Heavenly Father, we just thank you for Mitchell and all of the ministry that he has done. We thank you for his using the gifts that you have given him to your glory. We ask that the people that you intend for him to impact read his books and are impacted in the way you would like. Go with us throughout this journey, and we just give you all the praise, Lord. Thank you. Amen.
Amen.
Anyway, God bless.
Thank
you for your time.
Okay, thank you.
Take care. I just finished editing the interview I did with Mitchell. Enjoyed doing the post-production work on it because I got to hear him all over again. He writes a variety of things. He's written some books that would be really good for children to listen to, young adults, and given them some biblical principles, a series that I think parents would be happy to have their children read. He's also written some very serious, down-to-earth, true grit things that a lot of people have to deal with. His experience in counseling, in preaching, in teaching, he brings that all together in a true and meaningful way. In the interview, we probably got down into the weeds a little deeper than usual. I think I talked a little bit more than usual, and I try to avoid that. But anyway, I left it in because I hope you found it interesting. I do hope you enjoy getting to know these authors that I present here on the Wordsmith Forge Christian Fiction podcast. I'm happy that I finally learned how to say that all at one time without stalling out. Though I do hope that you'll support the authors that we present by looking into the work that they do and seeing if it's something you'd be interested in. If you do buy their books, please leave a review wherever you purchased them. Reviews are very important to us authors, even the ones that aren't stellar. A 3 rating is better than no rating. At least we know that you've looked at our work. I'm extremely interested in what you think of this podcast. I hope you will take the time to leave me a comment and like it if you like it. If you find these podcasts informative, please share it with your friends. If you find these podcasts interesting, please subscribe so you won't miss out when we release a new episode. If you find them both informative and inspirational, just tell the whole world any way you can. I do have high hopes for the Wordsmith Forge Christian Fiction podcast, and I hope you do too. Until next time, may God bless you abundantly and cover you with His amazing grace. Keep reading clean. This is Mike Baines, out.